I'm Han, I'm a creative director, and these are 13 tips that I think are actually useful for graphic design beginners and graphic design students. So let's just dive straight in. This one is probably a little bit controversial, but tip number 1, do not rely solely on Pinterest for design inspiration and references. Pinterest is not a design-focused app. A lot of references are not made by designers, and they are actually not good examples of design work. And when you're a beginner or a student and you don't know the difference between good and bad design work, working off of bad designs as references and inspiration won't get you anywhere. Rather look at sites such as Behance or Dribbble. Or even better, if you're inspired by a particular designer or design agency or illustrator or artist, just go straight to their portfolio or their website and you can get all of their references right there. Tip number 2, for the love of good and great design, please, pretty please, do not design your logos on Procreate or any raster-based software or program for that matter. Logos need to be created and exported in a vector format. Vector is made of lines and points, and it can be scaled an infinite amount of times without it losing quality. Raster-based files are made of pixels, such as a photograph, and it will pixelate and become blurry the more you manipulate or edit or resize the design. I have seen so many people online creating logos for clients using Procreate. Please, please do not do this. If you only have an iPad available to design and you don't have a laptop or a desktop, rather use Adobe Illustrator or Adobe Fresco. Those are vector-based programs and softwares. Otherwise, on a desktop, Adobe Illustrator is your best friend. Hannah's tip number 3 is to learn how to manipulate type. There are so many amazing fonts out there, but sometimes they don't exactly match what you want to do in your design, and therefore you have your creative and artistic freedom and expression to expand that type, turn it into a shape, an object, and manipulate it, create something new. And it's pretty easy to do once you get enough practice. By manipulating and editing your type, you can make some really beautiful custom personalized typography designs. Okay, so tip number 4 is crucial. Sketch first, then go digital. Ideas flow so much easier when you put pencil onto paper. And you'll be able to design so much faster than if you were designing or sketching digitally. 90% of your sketching should happen before you even open your laptop or iPad. When I was at university, my lecturers made us do a project where we had to literally sketch out 50 different logo designs before we could even move onto our digital program. And by doing this in the beginning, it made the digital process so easy because we had already done all of our sketching and I'd already finalized my concept on paper. I just needed to take my sketched concept and make it digital. So easy. The concept was already nailed. Tip number 5 is to spend more time learning color theory and color psychology. Color is a massive part of graphic design and it can literally make or break what you're doing. Colors have meanings, and understanding what messages and feelings and emotions each color portrays, as well as what colors work well together, can lay a strong foundation to completely transform your designs. Also, please don't try to use like 10 colors in your design. Rather opt for a simple color palette made of tints and shades from a certain hue. For example, can you see how much these colors are crashing and it makes it really difficult to look at? Rather find colors that are in a sort of similar tonal value and then use tints and shades of that color to create seamless and natural variations. Also, as a reminder, when you're designing copy, also known as text, the words, always ensure that they are completely legible if you are playing with color as well. Always put light on dark or dark on light. Don't be putting similar tonal values together, otherwise the viewer won't be able to read them, as you can see in this example. Tip number 6, less is more in so many ways. As we discussed in tip number 5 with regards to color, the same knowledge can be applied for typography. Just because we have hundreds of beautiful fonts in our machine does not mean that they should all be used together. I would suggest a maximum of 2 fonts per design. And then you can change the font face within the same font family. For example, making the header bold, the body copy regular, perhaps making a button in all capital letters. But they're all within the same font family to create that feeling of cohesion. Another thing, don't go adding a drop shadow to all your copy. I see a lot of beginner designers adding random drop shadows to the back of their copy when it really doesn't need to be there. There is a time and a place for drop shadows. Everything in design should be considered, so if a drop shadow doesn't need to be there, don't put it there. Tip number 7, don't be scared of negative space, also called breathing room also called padding. Padding is actually really necessary in creating a balanced, user-friendly design that doesn't completely overwhelm the viewer. Take a look at these examples I created. So this one is created with very little margins and there is minimal space between all of your copy. Again, your copy is your text or your words. Now this is an example that has taken negative space into consideration. Can you see how much easier it is to digest the information now that there's a bit of breathing room around all of your elements? Tip number 8, make sure that you have hierarchy within your design. As a designer, it is your job to convey information to the viewer in a visual way. Communicate visually in the most user-friendly way possible. You're telling a visual story. There should be main characters and secondary characters and side characters and props and so on. Headings, subheadings, body copy, buttons, call to actions, illustrations, icons, images, all of those play their role in telling your visual story. And if you make everything the same size without hierarchy, your viewer won't know what to do with that information because they don't know where to look. Take a look at these two designs that I created. One has no visual hierarchy and my mind feels a little bit lost when I look at it. But in the other example, I lead the viewer's eyes through the design. I've pointed out for them what is most important, what they need to do, where they need to look, how they need to feel. Creating hierarchy can be done in many ways, using color, shape, space, line, and so on. Next tip, number 9, consistency is key. Having a consistent design is so important when you are trying to convey a message to the viewer. Whether that be in the colors you use, the fonts, the icons, the imagery, buttons, etc. For example, if you're going to use icons, make sure that they all have the same stroke width. And if you're using solid icons, all the icons should be solid icons. And make them all the same size. Put all of your copy on a baseline so it lines up. Make sure your margins and gutters are equal. If you have rounded corners, make sure the radiuses are the same. And make sure all your copy is aligned. If you have chosen to center align it, it should all be center aligned. If you decided to left align it, it should all be left aligned. Always look at the small details in order to create consistency throughout your design, because that is how you make things easy to read. Tip number 10, this one is very important. Where will your design live? It's crucial to know this before you even start designing. Depending on whether you're designing for print or digital media, you'll be exporting your design in different formats, different color profiles, different font sizes, bleed, no bleed, millimeters, pixels. Know your dimensions, file formats, and file sizes before you even start. It will save you a lot of time having to go back and readjust stuff afterwards. Also, it's very important to understand the difference between JPEG, PNG, PDF, TIFF, SVG, and so on. You need to know how to use them, when to use them, and where to use them, and obviously why, because all those different file formats are there for a reason. Also, the size of your files. For example, you can't be putting a 6 megabyte image on a website. That is just way too huge for a website. So all those little things about knowing where your design is going to live will save you a lot of time doing the research beforehand. For tip number 11, I actually haven't seen too many people talk about this. I think it's something that needs to be taught a bit more, but it's about having a file naming system and sticking to it. This maintains consistency, it helps avoid your designs getting lost, and on top of that, it avoids you having to call your file final, version 12, 19, final, almost done, completely finished. Full stop. Because who wants to have doc.final x forever finished completed? Like, no, that's just way too much. We've all been there, we've all done it, but we are moving on from that time in our lives and we are moving to a file naming system where things are not going to get lost or too out of hand. For example, this is how I name my files. I'll say job number underscore client name underscore name of file underscore and then the version. Or sometimes if I don't have job numbers, it'll just be the client name underscore the file name underscore and then the version. So let me show you, for example, what I do with my files. So we're going to do it for this YouTube video. HanSelah underscore YT is my code for YouTube. So HanSelah underscore YouTube, that's what it's for, infographic underscore version 1. So it's a YouTube infographic for HanSelah YouTube and it's version number 1. If I then go in and I make a change, it'll change to V2, version 2, V3, V4, V5, and so on. And the last version, I will end it off with underscore fin. Fin stands for finished and it can also mean final. In an agency setting, finished means it's gone through finished art, which is the last phase in the design agency, before the design goes live. But if you're not in an agency setting, fin could mean final, which means it's the final design. So it'll be HanSelah underscore YT underscore infographic underscore fin. So I know if I need to pick up that file, I just go and get the finished file. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Tip number 12, I think we're on. Yes, tip number 12. Beware of copyright. I don't think this is spoken about enough, especially when it comes to beginners and students. Copyright is a real thing, and it can land you in some pretty messy situations down the line. For all images, icons, illustrations, mock-ups, fonts, all of those. If you're using images in your design, make sure it's a copyright-free image. Or you can purchase stock photography, which can get really, really pricey. Like, wow, stock footage is not cheap. There are loads of copyright-free sites, such as Unsplash, Pixels, Pixabay, I mean, the list can go on. Same goes for icons, illustrations, and fonts. Don't just go downloading fonts and using them without checking the license. Because yeah, you do not want to be caught years down the line using something that you actually weren't supposed to. And you're gonna have to explain that to clients, that the work's already gone live. Yeah, just be aware. And the last piece of advice, the final little cherry on top, tip number 13. This is just a reminder that a logo is not an illustration. I see a lot of beginner designers creating these immaculate, beautiful, detailed masterpieces for logos. But it is so unnecessary. That is absolutely not what a logo is. Because we are going to take that beautiful masterpiece and we're going to shrink it down into this tiny little logo for a social media profile picture, and all that lovely detail is just... it's going to be lost. It's going to go completely unseen. Logos should be really easy to read when they're shrunk down to a really small size. Also, they should be legible in black and white and in the color version. So if you're creating these giant illustrations as a logo, you're going to convert that to black and white and you're just going to see gray. You should be able to see all the elements of a logo clearly at all times, no matter what the size is. So yeah, that is the final tip. I hope I wasn't too brutal on all of these. I've definitely fallen victim to some of these tips, and obviously over the years I have been able to figure out what works and what doesn't work. These are some tips that I think all beginners and students should know from the get-go. Obviously there are a whole bunch of other tips that can be given, but these are probably the highlighted ones that I could kind of think of today off my brain. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more design related content. Sending lots of love to you all wherever you are in the world, because it's Valentine's Day soon. And yeah, bye.